About a dozen years ago, I was taking a bubble bath. This was interesting because I'm really a shower person. But in this particular case, I was taking a bubble bath. It was in the evening. It was in December. And another interesting thing happened, which is that my mother appeared to me. And this is strange because she had died of cancer a week before. So I'm in the bubble bath, and something is happening. I had a difficult relationship with my mother, whose name was Mary Ann. She suffered from narcissistic personality disorder and addiction, and she threw things and was an angry person. And it was on me as an adult to try and find my own healing and to try and figure out who I wanted to be. And one of the ways that I found healing, and I don't know if this has been your experience, was to learn about her experience. And so the more I learned about my mother, Mary Ann, and her life and her pain, the more I could feel compassion for her. And she had gone through lots of pain. She had lost her father. Her father had died in World War II when she was 5 years old in 1944, which then crushed her mother, who became very bitter. And her mother remarried, and he was abusive. So Mary Ann, who was really smart, this was in the 50s, decided she would go and be a journalism major and, sort of that vision of Mary Tyler Moore, like I'm going to go and make it in the big city. And she went to college on a scholarship, and she met a boy and got pregnant and dropped out. And I'm the baby. And my father wasn't around. When he was around, he was drunk. And then when I was 7, he left. And Mary Ann worked really hard, and she was mad. And she used to talk about how you can't trust anybody. Rick, you cannot trust anybody. The world will let you down no matter what you do, so you have to work hard, and you have to look out for number one, and Rick, you need to work harder. You need to work harder, and you need to be sure that you're successful, and you need to be sure that you are in front. And when I was the kid I was the dreamy kid, and I was the kid who read comics, and I was the kid who stared off into space and drew cartoons, and that didn't work for Mary Ann. And she was mad. And she stayed mad. And when she was really mad, she would scream. And then when she was really, really mad, she would throw things. And then when she was really, really, really mad, she would say, I should have aborted you like everybody told me to. So it was important for me to get into therapy. Can I get a witness? Amen. Does anybody know what I'm saying? And over the years, I did men's work and did lots of spirituality work and tried to get at how I could figure out who I wanted to be, having had this person be the primary imprint on my sense of self. Like, how could I find who I really wanted to be with all that she had said to me for years and years and years? And by the time I was in my 50s, we really weren't speaking. And so it was her sister, my aunt, who called and said, hey, you need to know your mom's cancer has come back. And I made the hard decision not to go be with her. We hadn't been in touch for a while. And I felt like if I stayed away from Mary Ann while she was going through her illness, maybe there would be a possibility for something to happen in me. Does that make sense? I was trying to open some space. And then I got the call that she had died. And I felt something shift in me. And so I look back and I think, this is like a dozen years ago, I look back and I think, is that why I was sitting in the bubble bath on a Thursday evening in December? I have no idea. What was I making space for? But I was curious about something, and I felt something was happening, and I didn't know what it was. Well, here's what happened. Now, I need to tell you, I have been a spiritual leader and a theologian, as well as a retreat master and many other things, and I think a lot about spirituality. I am not in the habit of seeing ghosts appear in my bathroom while I am taking a bubble bath. And I love Eastern spirituality as well as Western spirituality and indigenous spirituality and New Age, funky, weird spirituality. And over the years, my spirituality kind of overflowed the banks of religion. And even with that expansive sense of the universe, this was still weird for me because I say my mother appeared to me, but that's not really what happened. What happened was I felt her transport me somewhere. I was on one side of a river, and she was on the other side of the river. And for those of you who will know this reference, she looked like Grace Kelly in a white dress with petticoats. If you're too young for that, just think of all the, like Zendaya or some other amazing, beautiful, radiant creature on the red carpet of the Oscars the other night. She was splendid. She wasn't even touching the ground. She was just floating above the grass. And she was smiling. And when I say smiling, I had heard my mother laugh 10,000 times, but I'd never seen her joyful. And she was radiant. And I remember looking at her and thinking, what has happened in the last week for you? Something was happening. And she looked at me and she smiled and she said, Rick, honey, all those things I said to you. And I knew what she was talking about, all the things that she had said about how terrible the world is, and on and on and on, and how I was too lazy, and how I should have gotten it together and been all these other things that I was not. She looked at me and she said, Rick, honey, all those things I said to you, I'm sorry. I was mistaken. And she said it again. I was just mistaken. And I remember thinking, whatever you just went through in getting out of your body and getting out of the restrictions of the world that we're in, of space and time, whatever healing you've just experienced, how do I get that? What is this? How did this happen? How did this happen? And she kept smiling. And then, as I'm just trying to take this in, I remember, and I'm just there floating on the other side of this river from her. In the far distance are mountains. There's a gigantic, beautiful plain. Her bitter mother approaches and stands next to her. And she is radiant. She's so happy. She's peaceful. She's 25 again. And then her father, who died in World War II, is 25 and young and adorable and happy. He comes and stands next to her. And then the abusive stepfather, who is gentle and happy and sweet, comes and stands next to them. And then all my relations, all my ancestors came. And they filled that field in front of me. And they were all smiling at me and saying, she was just mistaken. That moment changed something for me. And the thing that changed for me was that it gave me hope. It gave me the hope to think maybe it's about the stories we tell ourselves. And for me, I really think that's why I became a healer. Because of that gift that not only Marianne, but all my ancestors traveled all that infinite distance to come and give me that moment where they just said, if it's mistaken, maybe you don't have to believe it. And so I became a story healer to help people look at their stories and know that sometimes it's okay to just say, it was just mistaken.